Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color.
Are you trying to mute me? No, it's just real loud, and I can't.
I sold Amazon, but it was $25.
Listening to listen, not listening to respond.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that.
All right, Jed. Well, first of all, thanks for having me back. I appreciate being here so much. But my name is Dorie Howell. I'm a portrait photographer outside of Washington, D.C., and that encompasses the entire Washington, D.C. metro area. I've been in business now for going on, 14 years. And I love what I do. And about 6 years ago, I started teaching photographers how to run profitable businesses, primarily starting photographers and people who were maybe had picked up their camera and wanted to take pretty pictures of their kids. A familiar story. It's my story too, of people who, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at this. And then friends and family start complimenting you and you start taking pictures, sessions for other people. And all of a sudden you realize you need to start charging, and you get a couple years into it and you realize like, oh, I'm not doing this right. Like, I'm editing way into the night. I'm taking too many sessions. Yeah. I'm not making enough money. Like, we've all heard this story so many times. And that was my story. And so once I learned a few things and figured it out, then photographers started coming and asking how I was doing it. So that's just kind of how that all came about. And I think the biggest thing that I've noticed since I've been teaching photographers is the number one thing that I think that impacts our business is the emotion of fear and how that manifests itself in our business and in our personality and in our lives, and how it can be such an incredible motivating factor. People say that fear is the greatest motivator. Well, it can motivate you to do a lot of things, but most likely when most people encounter this in their business, it's stopping them from doing something. It's stopping them from raising their prices, locking down a business model, locking down things that they want to sell, setting set studio policies and sticking with them. It impacts marketing. It impacts so much of what we do in our business that I found that really fascinating to dive into and learn about.
So, yes, and everything you're saying resonates with me. So I think this is a good topic, and it's been discussed. I don't know how many times it's been discussed, both on this podcast and in workshops and conventions. Like it's a big deal. So I think it's important to revisit it, because it's also one of those things that, well, I'll speak from my experience. It's one of those things that, yes, I can overcome fear during a season or a time in my life. And then later it comes back.
Right.
For me, it's not like, I overcame fear in 2006 and now I'm good.
Check that box. You're good, right?
Well, some things are kind of like that. Some things, you can work on this, that, and the other. And it's kind of like, okay, I'm done with that. But fear comes a knocking for me
all
periodically.
The time.
Right?
Yeah. And the thing is, I think that that's so important to realize, is that we all have our comfortable little box. And I like to say that we have, our box. And you've heard the, you hear lots of analogies and little like cliche phrases and that type of thing. But we all have our comfort area. We all have our box where we're operating and everything seems to be going well. But the thing is most of us, especially as entrepreneurs, we're not always comfortable just staying in our box. But as soon as we open the door to our box and we peek our head out, that's when fear comes back. And the thing is, all we're doing if we walk through that door is walking into another box. So here we have a small box. Okay, great. We conquered this one. Now we're in a bigger box. And the boxes just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Thing. It's exactly, that's exactly it. We never escape the box. So realizing that and realizing that it's completely normal. And also, I think part of the conversation is, especially with, dare I say, the younger generations, because I'm of a certain age where I can now say that there are younger generations entering into the business. Society has changed as far as what is acceptable from what we call I'm I have social anxiety, or I don't like to do those things, or those things make me uncomfortable. And we've created a society where society says, oh, well, if you don't want to do those things and you're not comfortable doing those things, then you shouldn't have to do those things.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
right? I mean, I'm just
Well,
keeping
I
it.
think that I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that one of the things is that a lot of people don't like to admit that they're afraid.
Oh, for
right?
sure. For sure.
Some people feel as though they can't.
Mhm.
And in some cases, there are consequences and repercussions for admitting
Absolutely.
that you're afraid.
Absolutely.
So it's a brave thing to do. And then the other piece, and I don't think this is a generational thing, this part. I think this is an everybody thing, is that a lot of times people want to use their fear as an excuse
Mhm.
to not succeed. Is it a Marianne Williamson quote? I think should have looked it up before this, because this always comes up. But
Yeah.
it's we're more afraid to succeed than to fail.
Yes.
We're more afraid of our light than the darkness.
Absolutely. Fear of failure is something that a lot of people, like, that's what they think that that resonates with them. But fear of success is a much
Fear of success.
Yes, it's a much bigger thing, because if we become successful, we start making more money. We have bigger choices. Our friends might change. Our family might look at us differently. Our clientele will change. All those things are related
they're not
to change.
mites. They're not mites.
No,
they're realities.
they absolutely
like
are.
that is what happens.
Yeah.
When you succeed. And it's the whole more money, more problems type of mindset too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I strive for success, and I don't think it's a bad thing to strive for success.
Right.
But I think the important thing with what we're talking about specifically here is to be aware.
Yes.
Right. So I think the fear of success is a valid fear. I think it's a rational fear because of what actually happens or what comes with success. But I think it's important to acknowledge it. And once you acknowledge it, then you can face it properly.
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing is, one thing that I've always told my clients and that type of thing is that it's okay if you change. We all change. I can honestly say, as a culture, many of us, in fact, a majority of us, are different people now than when we were March 10th of last year in the United States. Okay.
Yes,
and I've had a lot happen to me in those past, in the past 18 months. My mother died. My sister was diagnosed with cancer. My daughter was diagnosed with a tremendous eating disorder. I left the company that I built. I've had a lot of things happen. So I know that I am a dramatically different person than, and that's not even people who haven't had those traumatic life events happen to them in that 18, is it 18 months now? Almost,
almost.
Pretty
close.
In that 18-month period. So everybody has changed. Everybody has been impacted in one way or the other.
Everything has changed.
Everything has
it's all
changed.
different.
Right. Everything is different. So all of those types of things impact our business, impact how we think about our business, and impact how we want to move forward. And it's okay if some of us are feeling a little gun shy and feeling a little timid about, like, I wasn't able to operate my business for 8 months in my area, and now I got to do it. But guess what? Are people going to pay these prices? Maybe I should just lower my prices till I really get back on my feet. And so you do that. And then comes the roller coaster of, oh my goodness, I need to raise my prices again. So it's like you've backtracked only to have to deal with all those hurdles.
Climb the hill again.
Again, you have to climb the hill again. And that's what I'm doing in my studio. It's exactly what I'm doing in my studio. When my mom was ill, I had to close it down. I just, this was enough. And so I was already closed before COVID hit, and then COVID hit. And so that rebuilding process is scary. And I don't care if you've been doing this for a decade or if you're just starting out. When you're trying to build and reach out and market to people, that's a scary proposition. But understanding that the fear that comes with that is totally normal, and if you know to recognize it, and you know how to ask yourself certain questions, then you can conquer it. You can walk out into the bigger box more confidently.
So okay, considering you went through all that, and that lots of people have gone through lots of stuff, but I'd like to focus on what you went through, because it's one thing. We're a couple of talking heads right now, just kind of going back and forth over this thing that affects everybody to different degrees at different times in their lives. And the last 18 months has been unprecedented in so many ways. And you're laying out steps, or you're beginning to lay out steps, like this is what needs to be done, and this is how you do this. When you're in those trenches, though, and it wasn't very long ago that you were in the trenches, and maybe to some degree you're in some trenches, but when you were like deep in the mire, right? What is it that you do, or what has to happen, or where are you at in your mind? What actions do you take? I don't know how to even ask the question, but how do you get from even A to be at the beginning of when you're in it?
Yeah.
You're in it, and it's horrible. And how do you start?
Yeah. Okay. Well, my trenches were pretty deep. I rattled off some things really quickly there that were pretty life-changing. And in some way, in reference to my mom passing from cancer, because COVID hit, it gave me it relieved the pressure of having to rebuild something right away. I had the excuse of COVID, of being able to say, I'm not going to open my studio right away. And guess what? The world, I don't have to, know? And so in some instances, I looked at the positive side, and I'm a glass half full person. That's the way I look at life. I have positive energy. I don't let things get me down, and I don't complain about things that happen, because honestly, I don't want to be a complainer, and I don't think people are that interested in hearing my sob story about.
But why are you like that?
Well, I believe, this is interesting. I believe that there's kind of two different personalities in the world. And I think we're wired that way when it comes to our upbringing. My mom was very, very positive. I was raised in a faith-based home. We were not allowed to complain or moan. In fact, I was talking to my sister about this the other day, and there was one instance where I was probably, because I was the more outspoken of the two of us, being extremely, extremely bratty in our home, because I had tendency to be the bratty one, and complaining and whiny and that kind of stuff. And my mom just had enough. And so my parents were very, very faith-based people. And so my mom made us memorize a Bible verse that talked about not complaining, not saying bad words, not, if you can't find anything nice, don't say it at all, basically was the gist of the message. And I remember that dinner to this day of saying, you're going to learn this, and we are not going to listen to any sort of complaining. No one wants to hear it. It doesn't make you any more attractive. It doesn't make people want to like you anymore.
Right.
Like that. So that's a lesson I got from my parents.
It's very unbecoming.
Yeah. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear the negativity of life. And so I got that from my mom. And so that's something that obviously is ingrained in me so much that I don't even really recognize it anymore. So that's just my outlook on life. It's like, okay, last year when things were really bad and I was having to concentrate on things, my daughter and grief and all those types of things, it's just like, okay, I don't need to concentrate on my photography business anymore. It's going to be there, and I'll be able to ramp it back up when appropriate. But now with the ramping up, I still deal with the fear of marketing, putting myself out there, sending out those emails to people, asking for business, those types of things. Those aren't easy things for me to do, but as I do them, they have gotten easier. And the response gains momentum as well. So the more confident I become in sending out and reaching out and reestablishing my networking relationships and doing things like that, the more comfortable I get doing them, and it makes me okay in doing more. So it's like that perpetual wheel type thing.
Do you think that perpetual wheel also exists for someone that isn't wired the way that you are and that didn't have the positive influences and upbringing that you did. It may be much harder for them to start, maybe.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that perpetual wheel exists outside of who we are.
Sure. And it can go both ways.
Well, keep going with that now. It can go both ways.
So your perpetual wheel can go both ways. If I have a perpetual input into myself of positive energy, of positive reinforcement, of support from my family, of encouragement from the people that I interact with in social media, encouragement from my clients, it leads me to want to lean into that more. And a real life example of this now is just, Instagram and their little reels that they have. Yeah. I love doing Instagram reels. I'll do Instagram reels all day long. I'd much rather
your reels.
Yeah, I'd much rather do those than, some of the other things on social media. They're fun, they're catchy. I like using the music, that type of thing. Yeah. So I get a lot of positive feedback from people on my reels. So that leads me like, okay, people are enjoying this. So I want to do this more. And I also have I have certain challenges and goals that I've set for myself as far as certain social media,
Sure.
goals and that type of thing. But when you get that, then the wheel keeps going. Okay. If I get really great feedback for a certain style of photography that I'm doing, then I'm like, oh, people are resonating with this. I want to do that more. But the wheel goes the other way. The perpetual motion wheel can go forward or back when you put something out there and you hear crickets, or you put something out there and someone in your close circle questions it or criticizes it. And you start to get all those doubts in your head of, well, maybe I shouldn't have put that out there. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. So then the wheel's going back further. The wheel goes backwards when you are not hired for a really long time, when you're listening to outside messages that are negative. So I know it's fun to go to some, Facebook group or Instagram feed or that type of thing that has a negative twist. Like, this is not a real Instagram account. I'm not thinking of anything specific, but like, photographers hate their clients. Like, and it lists all the people send in, say, complaints about clients. Yeah. And you start feeding yourself those messages. Right. And all that negativity is going to do is slow down your wheel or even move it backwards.
Well, and even the flippancy, right? Like, because even the things that are presented in a way that's fun or a joke or sarcastic, even the flippant stuff can make that wheel go in a more negative path. Don't you think?
Oh, 100%.
There's a lot of that stuff right now. And don't get me wrong, I like dark humor. I like the sarcastic. I got memes all over the place that are dark and funny. And so I'm speaking to myself first. I really am. And my wife's not like that. My wife's like, why? That is not funny at all. Why do you think that's funny? Yeah. And well, I have all my own reasons for thinking that it's funny. However, I also believe very strongly that too much of that, especially if you get kind of caught up in that, that's not the positive perpetual wheel that we're talking about. That's actually going the other way, and it can lead to a dark place without you even knowing it.
Right. It can impact everything. It can impact how you interact with your clients. It can impact the message that you're putting out on social media. It can it can impact how you interact with your family at home. That negative spin is can be so detrimental. And as someone who doesn't live by the law of the negative spin, so to say, I find it exhausting. If I'm interacting with someone who is always, I can't do that. I won't do that. That will never work. Clients don't want that. And there's no support behind it. I find that I just find it exhausting, because a lot of those negative messages are just beliefs that you have in your head that aren't supported or quantified in any way.
They're not rational beliefs.
They're not. And until you get to a point where you can realize, you know what, my brain doesn't always tell me the truth about the situation.
That's so true.
Right? It doesn't.
So
It does.
true.
Our brain lies to us all the time.
Yeah, we lie to ourselves. We
And
certainly
we lie
do.
to ourselves.
Yeah.
And so once you can start realizing that you really need to take all these incoming messages and realize what you want to lean into and what you need to shove aside and stop listening to, then it can be a real struggle. And sometimes it takes a while to figure that out.
And you learn the hard way.
You can learn the hard way. And, one example of that is like, well, no one wants Prince anymore. No one's going to buy an album anymore. No one wants wall art anymore. We
Not
hear
true.
that. We hear that perpetuated over and over and over and over. And I'm like, well, if that were the case, why would Snapfish have made $3 billion in 2019?
It's
right? Like, obviously.
It's the Jim Gaffigan, I don't go to McDonald's. Well, I think there's a lot of people that are lying.
A lot of, right.
Billions and billions served. But I don't go to McDonald's.
Right. Or Chick-fil-A. Let's use Chick-fil-A.
You're right. Right.
Snapfish, I think, because I check their quarterly reports and different things when they send things out. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
So $3 billion that was not all made on photo mugs and school portraits.
Right.
People are getting pictures printed. You know, we have White House. It's a lab that is been operating for a long time. Yep. Obviously, people still want prints. So you have to
promise you they do.
Yeah, they do. You have to be able to take those things that you're telling yourself and have a come to Jesus moment with yourself and realize, is this just something I've been telling myself, or is this really true? And busting those false beliefs, it's hard. It's just hard. So, one thing I got a kick out of was, talking about our brain telling us the wrong stories. Is the other day, my husband and I, my daughter, we were watching the movie Luca, which is now on Disney Plus. So if anybody has Disney Plus,
not seen it, but it's on our list to watch.
It's on your list. Okay. Well, I'm not gonna ruin the plot for you here. I'm just gonna tell you one quick little thing. I timed this, so it's about 20 minutes in. And they're building something that they want to use. They're building a machine of sorts that they want to use, and they're testing it. And basically, because it's in Italy, they're speaking in English, but they have their Italiano accent,
Right.
And the one boy is telling the other boy, why, basically it's like, why are you scared? He's like, oh, I don't know. He's like, well, when that happens, you have to say, Silenzio Bruno, Silenzio Bruno. And basically the little boy says to the other one, the Bruno's inside your head, and sometimes you just have to tell it to silence. And
be quiet, Bruno.
Be quiet, Bruno. Shut up, Bruno. We're not going to listen to you today. We're going to do what we need to do. And I just I was half on my iPad, all that kind of stuff. When you're watching,
half in and out, right?
Yeah, half in and out. When you're watching movies with your kids, you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, whatever. but that, as soon as I heard that, I'm like, I peeked right up. And then I went back later and I watched the whole scene again. I'm just like, that is such a powerful message, especially for kids. Don't always listen to yourself.
Oh, yeah, it's great for kids.
Yeah. So that's in Luca. If anybody has anyone has Disney Plus, and I didn't give away any plot or anything like that.
No,
didn't ruin the movie for you. But Silenzio Bruno is kind of my new favorite phrase. That's
Silenzio Bruno.
Silenzio Bruno. But back to, you were asking me, how is it that I'm, as a person, how do I dig myself up out of the trenches? And I said, well, my mom and that type of thing. I think there are two different people in the world, and we're just this is how we're made. This is how we look at things. And I use the analogy of making a chocolate souffle.
Good. I like those types of analogies.
Yeah, those are good, right? Food analogies are always good. And but chocolate souffle is a complicated dish. It's not something that usually people are making the first time that they want to try baking something. But if you look at two different types of personalities, you have the type of personality like me, and I'm thinking maybe you, that, okay, I've never made this before, but I know I can figure it out and make a pretty good chocolate souffle. Before I've even tried it out. Sure. I'm not worried about this. I can do this. And then you have the people who, well, I need to watch 10 YouTube videos. I need to go to the store. I need to have all the perfect ingredients. I need to practice it 10 times and then maybe a few times more. And only after that happens, and I've seen the success of being able to do it, will I be able to say confidently that I can make a chocolate souffle. And I find in photography, when working with so many different photographers, almost everybody fits into one of those camps.
Yep.
And very successful photographers usually are in the camp of, yeah, I've never done it before, but I'm going to do it. I can do it.
Right.
Like they're the type A. I shouldn't say type A because that gives a different connotation when you're talking about personality types, but they're the first group. And then you have the people who struggle with decision making and those types of things over in the second side. And they're the ones who truly need to watch out for how fear impacts their business, because they will sit on a price increase that they know they need to make to be, to bring money home. They'll sit on it for 3 months. They'll sit on a business model. They'll procrastinate as far as what products to make. And so depending on what camp you fit in, when, the souffle model, but you could apply that to really anything. That's where you might want to say like, oh, am I really letting fear impact my business if I'm over here? And how am I letting it impact my business? And be aware of it. So it's just very interesting because I run the souffle scenario across a lot of really well-known photographers, a lot of your guests that you've had on the podcast previously, and that type of thing. And that's a pretty good representation of people with really famous, well-known studios who are doing really, really well, and people who are struggling. It's the decision-making, it's the fear of making the wrong mistake, those types of things that really get people stuck.
Well, if you're in that camp, if one suspects that they are in that camp, and we can use the pricing thing, because I think that does affect a lot of people.
Yeah.
If someone is listening and they think, you know what, I do need to bump my prices. I know I need to, but like that it's not going the way that it really needs to go. And I know that my pricing is too low, or even I suspect my pricing may be too low. What's the first step?
Okay.
What's the first step?
The first step is that you have to stop listening to those outside forces that have nothing to do and have no knowledge of how to run a photography business. And that can be hard because that can include people like your spouse, your partner, your parents, your best friend, your uncle at the cookout, those types of things who, if you're discussing raising your prices, you're going to get a lot of feedback that's going to say, I would never pay that much. You want to charge that much for pictures? Are you kidding me? No one around me is going to want to pay those prices. So that goes back to the negative messaging. So almost every big move that I've made in my business when it comes to pricing or anything like that, I don't tell anybody.
You don't talk about it with anybody? You just do it?
I just do it. I just do it.
I thought you were going to you're going to say something completely different. I thought you were going to be like, I have a person that's not, well, because, and okay. I think that you, to some degree, that you are able to do that or be that way in part because of who you are based on nature and nurture. But I also think that there are plenty of people who would have a much harder time doing it the way that you do it. Right. Even though the need is there, even though they need to make that decision, they need to take those steps. It seems to me that they may need some help, or they may need a hand to pull them through. And if that's the case, they need to look elsewhere. They don't need to listen. They can't look at Uncle Frank.
No, don't look at Uncle Frank.
Or their mom or their dad or their husband or their wife. They can't look at the people that are too close to them, that are naysayers. You got to find somebody that's going to encourage you to do what you need to do.
So that's a really good point. I have come to the realization that, and this was through an outside mentor that I had for 2 years, who was, he was fabulous. So he wasn't part of the industry. And I think I think photographers stay within the industry too much for their
Sometimes,
education.
yes.
There's really great people in the industry, obviously, but when it comes to really thinking big, so I was in a mastermind group for 2 years, a very, very high level mastermind. I was a little tadpole in this pond, barely even a tadpole. And the mentor basically would always remind us, when you're making decisions in your business, you have to remember these core things. No decision is permanent. No decision can't be changed. I mean, you can change everything. It's your business. If you want to charge people different prices, you can do that. Every decision, the big thing for me is every decision isn't permanent. And so if I get down the line and I raise my prices and I realize, also another thing is I usually don't raise my prices just unilaterally across the board. Like I'll raise my session fee, but I'll keep my products the same. Or I'll keep my session fee the same and I'll adjust the prices on my products. So it's not just a whole like jump in, I'm going to raise everything. Well,
and you don't need to go
100%.
from $20 for an 8x10 to 97.
Right. That's exactly it. In a day, you don't have to, because that goes, oh gosh, that's marketing theory and a whole bunch of things. We don't have time to go into that today. But
you're right.
But no decision is permanent. Every decision can be changed. Every decision can be modified. And, you know, so you tried to go from $27 to $97 in a day. And a month later, 2 months later, you realize, ooh, I'm ready to store those types of clients. That was a mistake. I'm going to go and make it, instead of going all the way back down to 27.
9 was supposed to be a 3 or a 4.
Yeah. Oopsies. I should have made that a $57.
Typo. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Oopsies. But you can change it. And the thing is, people don't notice when you make those changes. Like
it is funny how much we think we're being scrutinized or recorded by, like, all our moves are being, everyone's gonna. No, most of the time, especially if you do it incrementally or not globally, you know, in little in piecewise, it's very, very rare. And even if someone does notice and you're having that conversation, it's rare that somebody isn't going to understand, right? You don't need to do what's happened with lumber, right?
Oh, good gracious.
That's a big fat mess. You learn from that though. And like, well, I'm not going to do it that way. Right. But to go from $20 to $27 and to start, at least start, right? When you need to just start, right?
Right. And the other side of that is just starting. If you don't have any sort of clientele built up and it's not working now, then change it. Do something to it. Don't just leave it at $27 because you think someday it's going to click in and work. Because if it hasn't worked for the past 6 months, it's probably not going to work for the next 6 months. You have nothing to lose by making that change.
You have nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
In that case, you might be too cheap.
Yes, exactly.
For people.
Exactly. Because I know my clientele, specifically in the Northern Virginia area, which is a very, very wealthy area of the country, they're not, if they want prints, they're not going to hire someone that offers a $20 print.
Man, there are people in those classes that want to spend the money.
Oh yeah, and I'm right here. Hello, right here. I'm good. Right, I'll take it. I'll take it. And I don't say that flippantly. I provide a great service. I provide great products to my clients.
Well, no, you want to provide value too. We're not just saying, just jack up your prices. Allison Tyler Jones says it great. She's like, you want to create something that is worth the $5,000 that they're paying you.
Absolutely.
Don't just say, how can I make $5,000? Think to yourself, I want to make something that is worth that. I am going to do it. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to charge appropriately for it.
Absolutely. And a lot of the problem comes into, if we go back to the fear, our fear topic, is that because many photographers were not raised in a household that freely spent $5,000 on portrait sessions, and we're hearing
Right.
limited money messages their whole life of always clipping coupons and always bragging about getting something on sale,
Right.
and looking for the very cheapest thing. And I'm not saying that's a bad
It's
mentality to have,
It's not.
but if you're raised in that constant negative money lack mindset, and that's the messaging that you hear from your parents, then growing up and trying to form a business where average sales are $12,000, you're going to have to do some work to get your brain
On yourself.
on yourself, to get your brain in a place where you're okay charging $12,000 for a portrait session. That doesn't happen just magically.
No.
That happens by busting through box after box after box after box.
I like that. Yeah.
And I guarantee you, the person who sells a portrait session for $12,000, if they had someone come in and say, I want to spend $25,000, they might have to go and take a drink and take a deep breath, because that might make them like a little bit excited, a little bit uncomfortable, and they'd have to collect themselves for that.
Right.
So, back to the fact, doesn't matter what level you're at, we all deal with it. It's all totally normal, but recognizing it and knowing how to bust through it is what is going to impact your business the most.
Yeah. Amen.
So, I know that lots of people are like, well, how do I recognize fear? Like if I'm in my business, how am I going to recognize the points like that maybe I'm dealing with this? And procrastination to me is the biggest indicator of of fear. It's when you're putting something off, especially when we've all done this, where you put something off for so long and you've made it such a bigger deal than it is. Like sending that email that might be interpreted a little bit negatively, or those types of things. Not just pricing, but it's client communication, knowing how to communicate some awkward things with them, knowing how to communicate studio policies, not setting a policy. For example, I have a policy in my studio that if I'm doing a newborn session and there's a toddler sibling, like say a 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old, that they want to bring to the session, that they can come for the sibling pictures and the family pictures, but after that they need to go. Like someone needs to take them. And so a lot of times we're like, oh my gosh, how do you enforce that? I said, well, I let them know that I love their children and I think they're precious and they're adorable. But last time I checked, a 1.5-year-old doesn't listen to directions that well and doesn't have a sense of fear or comprehension that if they trip over my light stand, not only will they get hurt, but they will also damage and sink my Profoto lights maybe.
Right. Well, and the newborn's at risk.
Yeah, and the newborn, everyone's at risk with a 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old running around freely. And parents are tired. I don't blame them for like, oh, he's happy right now, just let him go. Like, I just want to sit here. So I have that policy, and that's something that newer photographers have always been like, how do you enforce that? I said, I'm just really honest about it.
Yeah.
And
you just put it out there.
I just put it out there. And if someone says, oh, well, my kid's really good, like we'll just put on YouTube or have them watch the iPad or something for a little bit, I usually just have to communicate. I understand that. I said, but this is a long session. Yeah. And I don't know any toddler that age that can sit still for if needed, 2 additional hours.
Yeah, couple hours.
So I say, there's a park nearby, there's ducks, here's some duck food, go get a Starbucks, and, partner, you take them out for a little bit, grandma, you take them out for a little bit, and we'll call you when we need you. Yeah. And that, I've never had anybody balk at that.
Yeah.
But that was a big stand that I had to make after having after having 2 sessions specifically where I had a wild, out of control toddler in my studio. And the parents, I think the parents were just normal. It was just like
you learned the hard way.
Yeah, they were just used to it. So it was like they didn't even really notice that my stuff was getting thrashed, and I was spending more time wrangling the toddler than the newborn. I'm like, this is going to take forever. We need to stop this. We need to stop this right now. And it's the same with IPS selection appointments. That toddler is great. We love them. We love photographing them, but they need to stay happily someplace else. Right. For that transaction. Otherwise, we'll be there for hours. Yeah. So procrastination on setting studio policies, procrastination on pricing. And, we have lack of motivation. If you're just not feeling it, it's not always necessarily that you don't want to be a photographer anymore, but maybe you're just putting off doing the things that you need to do. And on the other side, maybe you're overly motivated. Maybe you're working too hard. Maybe you're trying to get in 20 hours of work every single day for months and months and months. And it's not, it's not happening. You're working too hard. And sometimes you make decisions too quickly. And I raise my hand. I am someone that can make decisions too quickly. But the reason I do it is because I'm comfortable backtracking if I need to. I'm comfortable changing. A lot of people don't have that other side when they're making decisions too rashly. Or, you get too many things going. So fear can motivate and manifest itself in a lot of different ways. And so what I suggest when I have clients who are struggling with this, I say, okay, if you're really struggling with making a decision, this is, you have to reflect and say, why am I struggling with this? Why am I procrastinating this on this particular thing? What is the problem? What am I scared of? And I go back to, okay, well, then you have to tell your brain that it's okay. For you to be okay with it, your brain has to be okay with it. So has it happened before? Have you tried this before? And what was the result of that? Have you heard too many negative stories online from other people who who it hasn't worked for? But that doesn't mean it won't work for you. But are you listening to those negative stories too much? And our brain can only help us navigate instinctively experiences that have happened before. It's always trying to relate something. Okay, the outcome of this was good, so we can do that. But even people who struggle with going to a restaurant. Okay, I know I'm going to get a good dinner at Maggiano's, so yeah, let's go to Maggiano's. That's great. Oh, but there's this new restaurant over here I've never tried before. Do we want to try it? Well, I don't know. I kind of want the sure thing over here because I don't want to risk something. Maybe not having a good time, risk the unknown. So you have to realize that's happening up here totally subconsciously. Those are the things that are going through your brain, and know that if you listen to something and if you listen to something too long, if you hear a message too long, if you tell yourself something too long, this is where it gets a little sciencey, is that you've actually created a physical pathway in your brain that the neural pathways, man, that are gonna send you down that road, because that's the easiest. And it takes 30 to 60 days to reprogram that. To put up the detour sign and say, no, we're going to go this way now. But it doesn't happen by itself. Yeah, it's an act of will. You have to choose to do it. Absolutely. So if you find yourself in a situation like with those negative memes and negative Facebook groups and those satire Instagram accounts and that type of thing, you have to make a conscious choice to unfollow, to delete, to turn them off. And start listening to things that are a little bit more positive and encouraging and beneficial to the place where you want to go in life. And that's with everything. Sound advice. We're talking about photography here, but it's really with everything that you need to do that with. And it's human nature and you can't avoid it. So fear is a mighty, mighty beast, but it can be conquered if you really put some time into it. There's no question you were speaking directly to me, whether you knew it or not. I appreciate it. Tell me Jed, this, where can people find you? Yeah, well, right now I'm on Instagram. It's just the Dorie Howell. Dorie spelled Dorie. And Instagram. And then I have a new Facebook page that I just started. It's called Harmony Hangout. And I came up with that company name, Harmony Hangout, because I believe that all photographers should be able to live in harmony together, and it should be something that is enjoyable. And I believe business should be fun and something that we all can benefit from. And it doesn't matter if you're all inclusive, products only,
Right.
certain genres, this, and this, so we all can benefit and learn from each other. So that is where the harmony part came from. And the hangout part came from the fact that I just like to hang out with my friends.
I like it.
And so harmonyhangout.com. It's also on Facebook page, Harmony Hangout. And then on Instagram, it's just the Dorie Howell.
I like the positivity. I like the positivity as a tool to conquer and overcome fear. I really appreciate your time and your attitude.
Well, thanks,
It's
Jed.
uplifting. It is. It is.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best. I'll see you next time, Dorie.
I appreciate it, Jed, so much. Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this conversation presented by White House Custom Color on YouTube. Be sure to check out our other content and click that subscribe button right there. Right. Right there. It's there somewhere.